We made this.
Hello and welcome to ChuckyVision, the podcast about Chucky, Child's Play, killer dolls, and basically whatever we can create as a tenuous link to that here on the We Made This podcast network. We have done some tenuous shit recently, but this one's actually pretty relevant. My name is Mark Adams and I am your host this time. This is a bonus episode on our monthly run where we just do one episode a month between series of Chucky, but we're doing an extra one. And I'm joined by Dev Elson. Hello, Dev.
Hello, everyone. And you are right. It feels like a while since we've recorded, and it feels like a good while since we've talked Chucky.
I know. It has been a while since we recorded in reality. It may not be like we've not missed an episode or anything. It's just we recorded a couple quite a while ago. Whereas now we've got this one. We're looking at Living With Chucky today, the documentary that was released about a fortnight ago in the UK for us to access. And as soon as we possibly can, we'll be looking at the Chucky Season 2 Blu-ray. So there's going to be 2 bonus episodes, like 3 episodes in a month rather than the monthly schedule we've been doing. And it feels weird, even though we've done like weekly episodes in the past. But yes, we are looking today at Living With Chucky. Living With Chucky is a documentary written and directed by Kyra Gardner, who is kind of revealed at one point, even though everybody knew, as the daughter of a crew member from most of the Chucky films. The DVD features an audio commentary, a trailer, bonus interviews called Candid Conversations, Favourite Death Scene, Reception from Families, and it was released on April the 24th, 2023 in the UK. We try very hard to not watch things illegally. We have to with Chucky, but we decided with this that we would wait until the British release date for the simple reason you want to support a project like this. Like, it's going to make a big difference if you pirate it, basically, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. You even downplayed, how did you say it? Kyra or Kara? I was thinking Kara, but I can't remember actually how they say it in the...
I think it is Kira, and I just read it as Kyra.
Yeah.
Fuck's sake. We could re-record that, but I'm not going to.
But, in a sense, downplaying Kara's involvement here. And I say involvement, this is her project, yeah. Directed, written by, produced, edited. She did everything. Like, she's probably going to put it out herself until it was picked up as an actual documentary to be put out. So this is a complete passion project for her. And so, yeah, it should be supported, especially by the fans.
Well, you say that. The commentary, which we will be taking a look at later on, but she kind of elaborated on that, and that this project was several years rather than a quick thing. And it actually expanded on a student film when she was studying media. So it kind of just ballooned from its original intention into what we've got on Blu-ray and DVD now. It's distributed by Lightbulb Film Distribution. And I thought that it might just be her again. It's not. I had a look at their website and they've got some interesting stuff, none of which I've seen, but I'd quite like to. Things that I noted was, it's all horror. Home, which stars Kathy Bates. Gotta love a bit of Kathy Bates. The Pebble and the Boy, which is set in Manchester, where I live. And Satyr, which is a kind of folk horror film based around... Do you remember Mr. Tumnus?
I believe there's
a wardrobe.
Satyrs.
Yeah, that's right. A Satyr, or I don't know how to pronounce it, but there's one of those.
Yeah.
That looks fun because Evil Mr. Tumnus is almost as good as Evil Winnie the Pooh. We've both recently watched Evil Winnie the Pooh. Did you like Evil Winnie the Pooh, Dev?
Well, I'm not sure about it. It was fucking shit.
Oh, come on. I enjoyed it for what it is.
I hated it for what it was. It's a funny idea, not a good movie.
Oh, some of the killings were good. The gore was good. It was fun.
That's why I hated it. It wasn't fun. It's such a dour, serious movie.
I don't disagree with any of this, but I still really enjoyed it. We did actually put a little thing out on Twitter. No one else agrees with me. Everyone else thinks that Evil Winnie the Pooh is shit. I'm not even calling it by a real name, Evil Winnie the Pooh. But yeah, I liked it. Don't care. Anyway, the music in Living with Chucky is done by Jerry Lambert. And the cast is basically everyone other than Tyler that's been in a Child's Play or Chucky film. And that actually leads me on to we didn't get much response, actually, unfortunately, when we asked for opinions on this. Maybe people haven't watched it yet. But from my friend Dan James, who is at rubber_Dan1 on Twitter, please note that is a naughty profile. So if you don't want to see rubber people, don't look at his Twitter. But he said, the sarky part of me wanted to call it Living with Nepotism. I did love the documentary, but there is no way a standard filmmaker would have gotten that level of access. Whilst mean, I think...
I guess that was the point of it, though.
Yeah.
I mean, it was originally a college project, so it's like, I wouldn't say it's nepotism in the way that, like, oh, she's going to make $1 million off this. Like, this is more for her than anything else. So I wouldn't say it's nepotism, because nepotism is more like, you want your child to be successful. And this is way more of a passion project than it is a cash grab.
Yeah, but I think also there is an element of truth in as much as she simply couldn't have had more than like 3 or 4 actors involved if they weren't just being kind to a friend's daughter. I agree that it's a passion project, and I hope she does make some money from it. But I also think that it is kind of phenomenal in as much as it simply couldn't have been done by an independent filmmaker. It had to be, well, essentially Kyra.
We'll get into, well, I do want to get into like what this is as a documentary and like, you know, its structure and how it came about. But like the core of it is her experiences in this world, where she is, her position. And so it's not nepotism in a sense that, oh, famous people are taking the roles of non-famous people, because no one else could really make this documentary except her.
Yeah. I think it was originally supposed to be a big reveal who she was. And they planned to do it that way. And they even acknowledge it in the film that it was like, yeah, you're not surprised and it's not a big reveal anymore. But I think it was planned to be.
Yes, it is in the commentary that she had edited it so that she only shows up in the last third. And when this was picked up by Lightbulb, they put her in the trailers and everything. So it became more about that. Don't get me wrong, straight up front, I really enjoyed this. I'm glad I watched it. But there, you know, it's fair to say, because she acknowledges all of this in the commentary, which is good for her. This is her first feature-length documentary. It was originally a short, so she's expanding something that she's already built. It's a natural but awkward way to expand that. And the structure is a little odd because of that. Like, it's called Living with Chucky, and it's about her experiences, but then you don't get that angle until the end of the documentary.
Yeah, and that wasn't what I'd expected from the trailer.
Yeah, and she did admit in the commentary that she would have put that earlier if she's remake it or re-edit it or something. She might want to restructure it. What we do get though, it's an odd documentary because I thought it was just going to be the first act. I wrote in my notes, like, oh, cool, we get a cool recap of all the Chucky films. That takes up most of the documentary, us going through each Chucky film. And it's nice, don't get me wrong. I really like hearing everyone involved talk about the origins of Chucky and as we go. But Kyra Gardner's father, Tony Gardner, he doesn't get involved until Bride of Chucky. So half of the franchise doesn't have anything to do with her.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? And I think you're absolutely right. And it's odd, but I also think it's actually really framed very, very well. The way it starts with VHSs and then DVDs and then Blu-rays on that shelf. I think that had some really lovely thought in it that I really liked. And did you notice that the intro was from the Horror Hall of Fame?
Yes, I did note that. Yeah, Robert Englund's intro to Chucky.
Yeah, because we looked at that not so long ago, and so it immediately was dead easy for us to spot. Did you feel like the very first opening bit felt like an opening to a feature film rather than a documentary film?
It was a strong opening. It was really well done, all of it. I mean, that's kind of a niche cut, the Horror Hall of Fame, to get that in there. And then Lucas David did all the animated, the animations and stuff for the opening. Really cool opening. But you get all these really cool kind of Tim Burton-ish drawings of the cast and crew.
Yeah, and I think it really shows how much it was, like you say, a passion project, but also how much support she got as well. It feels like only she could have made this film. There is no way someone that wasn't that deeply involved would have been able to access that level of footage, really.
Yeah, everything I say, and probably we say, about, quote-unquote criticisms about form or structure on this documentary, like, it is absolutely a case of, like, this is really remarkably well put together. We say, oh, she's got all this cool access to all these people, but she'll say in the commentary, like, some of these people she had access to, these interviews were, like, done in 45 minutes. Like, set up the cameras, and she set up the cameras, she set up the lighting, she did everything herself off camera, and, like, some of these interviews were only, like, 45 minutes, like, start, finish, done, out of there. I've done documentary stuff in uni myself, and yeah, it's a goddamn pain having, like, this is the interview I've got, and some of it is boring. There's tangents. I've got to try and structure this in an interesting way, and she did a really, really good job with all the random dialogue she had.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like I say, I love this, and it is completely unique because of the, whatever you want to call it, level of access, nepotism, whatever. And I think it's a phenomenal thing for fans of Chucky. That's reflected in the ratings on Rotten Tomatoes. It's 77% fresh anyway, but it's also got a 95% audience rating. And I think, honestly, what's not to like as a Chucky fan with this level of access for us as well as for her,
Yeah, it really is well put together for what she had. I mean, like, the kid's point, the one I was thinking of, like, Marlon Wayans, it's a surprise when he shows up, but like, Marlon Wayans is in this throughout, like, from beginning to end. He keeps popping up and giving thoughts. And so I was like, oh, that's really cool that Marlon Wayans gave his time for this. And it is cool. But, like, then in the commentary, she's like, oh yeah, I only had Marlon Wayans for like 20 minutes. And it's remarkable how much she managed to use from that, because it looks like he's in it throughout. Like, it looks like he really gave his time.
Yeah, and I mean, Marlon Wayans was an odd choice for me, but she did vaguely justify the odder choices subsequently in the commentary. She also pointed out that she tried to get in touch with Tom Holland and Justin Whalen. Justin Whalen, she simply couldn't get to him through any agent. And Tom Holland just said no, thank you, which is kind of sad.
Yeah, it's sad that at his age, he's like, no, I'm not involved anymore at all.
Yeah, but the thing is, Tom Holland and Justin Whalen aren't part of what would be considered to be the Chucky family. They're not the regular folk. And they're not friends with, let's be blunt, Kyra's dad. So they were tougher for her to get. And that kind of shows you what it would have been like had she not got her dad on side and all of his friends,
Yeah. Just as an aside, yeah, I really feel like Tom Holland, if he buried the hatchet, he would be part of the quote-unquote extended family, but he just refuses to, which is sad. But yeah, you get all the expected faces, like Brad and Fiona, Don Mancini, David Kirshner. You get all the people you expect to see. There are some odd faces you don't expect to see, but then they all have explanations, and they are, I don't want to call it nepotism. I don't want to call it nepotism. She's just, friends with these people.
Yeah, I think nepotism is a strong term, but you can see where she struggled, where she didn't know the people personally, like Tom Holland and Justin Whalen.
Yeah, so she got, Lin Shaye showed up, and that was a weird connection because she's well known for horror films now, like with The Conjuring and stuff, but she knew Tony Gardner from way back with, what was it, There's Something About Mary? So that was the connection when they knew each other. Abigail Breslin, who was in the Zombieland movies, Tony Gardner worked on those, and that's nice because she's in it a lot. I think Kyra does say on the commentary that her and Abigail are good friends because they made friends on the Zombieland sets. So that's nice. They got a new one, Ella Rain. She was the lead star of Bad Hair, and Tony Gardner worked on that as well.
I want to see Bad Hair so much. It's been on my watch list for ages, and I keep trying to ask people to watch it with me, and no one wants to watch Bad Hair. Will you watch Bad Hair with me, Dev?
Sure, yeah. I was aware of it. Yeah, I never got around to it. I hear it's fine, but I'll watch it.
And so talking about some of the guests, David Kirshner had some really interesting stuff about the kind of genesis of Chucky and the things that they felt inspired it, and mentioned something that was already on our list, a film called Magic, but two things that weren't. Talking Tina, which was an episode of The Twilight Zone, and a book by Betty Wren Wright called The Victorian Dollhouse Murders. Now, I looked up The Victorian Dollhouse Murders. If you want to buy a copy of that in the UK, it's £100 on eBay. However, there is an audiobook, which is $7.99 on Audible. So what I might suggest, Dev, is that when we look at the Victorian Dollhouse Murders, we listen to the audiobook, yeah?
Yeah.
I'd actually quite like to do that soon, because we've not done a book for a while. We've not done an audiobook ever. So that could be quite fun. So maybe we'll nudge that up the list. I have already bought it on Audible because I just got my credit. Anyway, so I think there was some interesting stuff as well as that. We found out that it was originally going to be Buddy rather than Chucky, and that obviously was a weird little link to the remake because there were Buddy dolls in that. And, right, redheads are seen as the harbingers of evil. What? No. Is that an American thing? I think there's a ridiculous stereotype of like gingers being grumpy and angry, which is in the UK, but harbingers of evil? That's fucking insane. You're kind of ginge. What do you think of that?
I was always aware of that, yeah.
What, harbingers of evil, not just like fiery redheads as a thing?
Yeah, I knew that was always a cliche or a trope or a stereotype. I don't know what the examples of that are pre-Chucky, though. Because I would always associate that with Chucky. So I don't know what they were going off before Chucky.
Yeah, and that's the thing. They were suggesting that he was deliberately ginger because they felt that that played into this thing of redheads being harbingers of evil. Do Americans know that we call redheads gingers? Because I may have just confused everyone.
Probably.
They do now. And another thing I didn't know was Chucky's face was inspired by Jack Nicholson in The Shining.
Yeah, I don't know if I was aware of that. I knew some of this stuff, but I don't know if I was aware of that one. It does go back to that thing of what we were talking about, how a lot of this documentary is recapping the film. Well, not recapping the films, but recapping the behind the scenes. So yeah. It is strange. She does say about this in the commentary, how she's like, oh, it was really fascinating to learn about all this stuff. Like, I didn't know this and I didn't know this. Some of this stuff we've already talked about. I wouldn't even say it's really her fault. It's more like how the trailers and stuff portrayed the documentary in terms of like, I didn't think this was just going to be one of those recap documentaries.
No, and I think it was much, much more than that.
Well, I didn't think it was going to be like this at all. You know, like I didn't think there was going to be much recapping stuff at all. But I don't want to harp on what it isn't and what it is. Like, I really like what it is. But yeah, I guess comparing it to other documentaries that exist, like Crystal Lake Memories and what's the Nightmare on Elm Street one? Oh, I can't remember. But they're made by the same people. And those documentaries covering the Friday the 13th series and the Nightmare on Elm Street series, those are like 6 hours each. So those go into exhaustive detail of each film. And obviously, Kyra Gardner doesn't have that kind of access. She's not a full-on production crew. But it does feel quite scant in comparison.
Yeah. I think what's really interesting is some of the stuff that you just haven't seen before. Like the footage of Brad Dourif in the booth was fantastic. I loved seeing that. I think that may be my favorite thing in the entire film is seeing the kind of proper behind the scenes stuff of how like Brad was so dedicated to the role and like throwing his arms around and pulling faces. And yeah, I loved that.
So yeah, that is cool, but like that's already on YouTube.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, I've seen that.
Oh, all right. Fine.
I still enjoy it because it's like, well, I guess it's like the other documentaries. It doesn't matter how long they are. It doesn't matter if these guys are giving information that I already know. It's still fun to watch them talk about it.
But I think continuing like looking at Brad Dourif, he says some things that are really quite dark. You know, at one point he says he doesn't believe there's any such thing as evil. It's just humanity. I've paraphrased there, but that's basically what he says. You wonder whether he would have been that candid if it wasn't someone like Kyra.
Yeah, I remember that. I did. To be honest, I think he started a sentence and didn't really know where to go. I sort of got his point.
Yeah. I want to very, very briefly note that they don't reference Ed Gale. They refer to a little person. And since we last mentioned Ed Gale on this podcast, we mentioned him in a positive light. We had some, some light-hearted discussion about Howard the Duck. It has come out that a creepycatcher unit has confronted him on a camera and he's admitted to some pretty fucking unpleasant things. So I can see why they kept their distance from Ed Gale, because they wouldn't want to be associated with him. And I think, we didn't say anything positive about the man personally, but I think in future we'll probably avoid talking about that particular gentleman ever again on this podcast.
Yeah, I think we probably said everything about him anyway, his involvement. And he definitely had less involvement as the series went on.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on. I've not made a note of who said it, but someone said that they were pleased that Chucky never went too comedic or into outer space as the sequels continued. I thought that was a really interesting thing. And the other one was Christine Elise's hat. It's actually her hat. It was in Chucky Twice,
that was nice.
And it was also in Beverly Hills 90210 as well. She just got a hat what she likes and wants to wear.
Yeah, see, I didn't know that. I didn't know that tidbit, and that was a fun one. That's just her character hat. All her characters just have that hat.
I thought it was interesting how independently both Jennifer Tilly and Billy Boyd had like quite in-depth discussions on how they differentiated their voices for certain aspects of the characters they were playing, like a different voice for Jennifer Tilly playing Jennifer Tilly compared to Jennifer Tilly playing Tiffany, and also Billy Boyd's flip from Glenn to Glenda. I thought it was really, really interesting how they did that. And yeah, I liked that.
I remember us really commending Tilly for that, especially during season 2, when there's quite a bit of her versus Tiffany. And yeah, when those two are talking to each other, you really do hear the difference.
Yeah. And it also did really nice job of discussing trans and gay issues really sensitively. And if you watch the director's commentary, Kyra actually comes out as queer as well, which I thought was a really nice little personal journey for her as well, engaging with a queer franchise and then using it as part of her way of coming out. I thought that was really quite deep, and yeah. I'm like, good for you, girl. And I don't think right. For some reason, I hadn't clocked that Curse of Chucky is 10 years old.
Yeah, those movies are old now.
Yeah, and they feel so recent. I think because they are linked so closely to the teleseries that they were almost prequels to the teleseries. I feel like they feel more recent than they are. And yeah, when I was looking at that, it was like, good grief, time goes so fast. Which is weird because John Waters doesn't age.
No, he doesn't.
No, and he's also still fucking hilarious. Again, loved the John Waters stuff. I thought he was charming and funny and peculiar and exactly what it needed. I think it could have been a little bit over earnest, but putting that weirdo in was fucking perfect.
And again, in the commentary, just a really good example of how close everyone is in this franchise. That he was actively working on his new book, like downstairs writing while she was setting up, and then he came up, did the interview, and then went back down to working. Like everyone is happy to talk about Chucky.
Yeah, I mean, it's well documented that Waters really loves Chucky as well, isn't it? And I think it even said that the Glen doll he had in the background was his personal property rather than...
Yeah, there's photos. There's a lot of photos. Whenever he's posing for like a photo in his office, he always props Glen up.
Yeah. So we are just basically kind of going chronologically through what we saw on the documentary. I wanted to mention something from the commentary, actually, that we missed. That Child's Play 3 was deliberately shorter because of the Jamie Bulger controversy. And I had no idea that Americans were as aware of what happened there compared to us British folk. And it fascinates me that so much time has passed and it's still considered controversial, despite the fact it was 100% disproved. The police even said it was actively unhelpful to blame this film. And even now, things like this documentary are affected by the utter bullshit of the British tabloids blaming Child's Play 3 for those killers. It's fucking insane.
Yeah, but again, that shows Kyra's awareness of, this is her first film, and this shows her awareness of building stuff. That she noted that would have been like an immediate slump in tone. Like that would have been so downbeat just to bring up halfway through a recap.
Yeah, and she's right, because that's exactly what I just did in our episode.
But then I guess the alternate is like, because I did note when I watched it the first time that, like, much like Chucky, Chucky 3 itself, they're just like, yeah, Chucky 3, it was a movie we made. On to Bride. Like, that segment felt really short.
Yeah.
It does make sense, though, because I thought they just didn't have anything to say about it, but it does make sense that they did talk about that film more, but it was in a sad light, so got cut down.
One thing that I noticed as we watched through it, because there was quite a lot of footage of Don Mancini, it showed how he aged over time. And I tell you what, he's much hotter now. He's like a fine wine.
Don, yeah. He is a good-looking guy. He's always been in shape, hasn't he?
I just think he's really sexy now. And he was just a bit of an awkward nerd when he was younger. I'm sure he's still an awkward nerd now, but he's a kind of more mature, sexier, awkward nerd. A bit like me. But another thing I found really interesting was the kind of parallel between Kyra and her dad and Fiona Dourif and her dad. And they actually had like a little discussion on how weird it was being on set with their dad doing that sort of thing. And Fiona Dourif was like, yeah, but your dad wasn't a murderer. That was more weird, surely. And I thought, yeah, and I hadn't really thought about it until that discussion, but obviously there's going to be like a parallel between Fiona and Kyra.
This is what all the trailers are about, and this is what all the promotions were about. So it's a little odd that this is so small. I get it. it would have been more difficult to make a structured documentary around this. But like, I'm glad we got what we got because it is a really interesting parallel. These people growing up within the franchise, and there is some really interesting conversations had about it. Like, I really loved when they do the little stylistic change when the camera pans down to see Tony Gardner on the floor. He's been on the floor the whole time. And I think it's Fiona who says something like, "Well, he's always on the floor."
Yeah, and I think if it hadn't been for the trailers, it would have actually been a fun reveal, but it wasn't. It just felt odd. And I like that she even acknowledges that in the documentary itself, let alone in the commentary. I thought she handled that really, really well, actually.
Yeah.
And again, going back to the production levels, just before they started talking about how they were so savagely cut for the final two films, they had some really cool evil sewing, which was really well done. So it seems like they at least invested in this film, even if fucking Curse and Cult had no money. There was some nice, like we talked about at the start, there was some really nice linky bits in this.
Oh, yeah. This, and again, this is good credit to Kyra, in terms of it's not just talking heads. She does put in these little interim bits of like seeing a Chucky doll slowly get built, and it's shot really well. And again, in terms of like her just using what she's got, like that was an actual Chucky doll being built. It wasn't built for the sake of this documentary. She just managed to show up and get it caught on camera. And those don't just look nice, but they also showcase, like, no matter what the budget is, there's a lot of care and attention and effort put into making these.
Yeah, exactly that.
Like, even the overalls, let alone the animatronics.
Yes. Yes, and didn't they say it cost thousands and thousands for just one fucking doll?
Yeah. And that's the thing, crazy stuff about what Tony Gardner had to go through, because it was Seed, wasn't it? Yeah, Seed was the one that was after Universal. And Universal just didn't give them any of the props or designs for the props and stuff. So Tony Gardner and his team for Seed of Chucky, that Chucky was just built off watching the earlier movies.
Which is insane. You'd think there'd be a little bit of kind of generosity and like,
nope.
I don't know, it just seems really bitter.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they still had him. I think maybe they just threw him away. It was just recycled. Maybe. So they didn't have anything. Then the same thing happened when, like, 10 years later, when they did Curse of Chucky, and they were like, oh shit, we're making another Chucky film. They had to do the same thing again. At least Tony was doing it again, so he knew what he had to do.
Yes, exactly that. Exactly that. Yeah. They acknowledge how fans don't want to see CGI Chucky, but they also elaborate that, you know, the actors prefer practical effects too, because you can act better and engage more if you can actually see blood, guts and gore instead of a wall made of green. And I think that's kind of like an interesting thing to see, that it's not just a fan thing. The actors are much, much happier away from CGI. I mean, I'm sure they'd all take a fucking job with Marvel, but still, you know, it's nice that it's not just us being whiny bitches. They like it too, in a way.
Yeah, no, it's it is interesting to hear all of these points on what makes a film. Again, like the actors, again, you know, the director, the special effects people. It goes to show, like, these, it can just be a work relationship or more, like a, you know, like a quote unquote family. Like, these people working closely together makes the end result better.
Yeah, and you know, I was actually expecting, because, you know, of all the queerness, the usage of a term that you see a lot on something like Drag Race or whatever, chosen family. There wasn't an explicit reference to chosen family, but it does show you how people kind of become like a family and become close when they're thrown together in a situation that's important to them. And for me, that has really resonated, because I work in British wrestling, and you lose huge amounts of your leisure time when you have a world like that, where, you know, on a Saturday night, you're shouting out wrestlers' names rather than going out and getting hammered with your gays. And I feel like I understand it. And it really kind of like resonated with me that all these people that I would have never been friends with if it wasn't for working on the British wrestling scene. So I'm so close to them and they matter so much to me and I care about them. And it feels like I really do understand it. And I probably wouldn't use the term chosen family either, actually. I don't know where I was going with that.
But yeah, no, there's some more notes about family. Like, I like how they talk about like the differences as well, not just it's like we're a family, we're all the same. It was a good when Kyra and Fiona in a similar position of their dads working together and working on this series and stuff, but Kyra's dad, like, he actually had to go away and be on set all day working on this, and Fiona has some experience with that as when she was a kid, like Brad having to go off and do films and stuff. But she says it's kind of different these days now because Brad he has a recording booth like in his house, so he doesn't actually go anywhere to record Chucky.
No,
but they they do talk about really fun stuff. Like Kyra has a really good story about seeing her dad die in Seed of Chucky, not expecting that, not understanding that, and then. Fiona, not even in Chucky, Fiona has seen that a lot. Like, that must be such a weird experience. Like, Fiona couldn't even, like, just enjoy Lord of the Rings as a movie. She still has to see her dad die in that.
I wrote down in my notes how Kyra and her dad are really, really candid. But then I thought, well, no, everybody's really, really candid. Like you were saying about Fiona as well. I think it's a remarkable thing how this documentary does feel so personal, so raw in a lot of ways. And I think that's organic because, again, of who was the documentary maker.
Again, I keep prefixing all my nitpickings with a compliment that it is well done for what it is. It's odd when I watch the extras, which we'll talk about. I felt in those extras there was a heightened candidness between them, like laughing and joking and stuff. And I kind of wish a bit more of that was in the actual documentary because the first half of it, with all the recapping and stuff, is quite formal. Not formal, but it's just talking to the camera. And then that last third suddenly feels so much more candid. Like I want more of that.
Yeah, well, you say that. What was your opinion on including random shit about Comic-Con? Because I felt like the film was a little bit too long and that was an easy cut. It felt so tacked on. We'd seen how you'd got the timeline of Chucky and then we'd got the personal element of it. And then it just felt like me a little bit of kind of like, thank you for being fans. I didn't need that. I really felt like I didn't need that. And it felt like it got tacked on. It watered down the kind of emotion of the actors and their involvement. But one thing I did like was Christina Leese's acknowledgement of how shitty online fans can be.
I guess the ending, I'd have to rewatch it and see exactly how it came as a conclusion. But I from what I get from that, it's kind of the extended family, including the fans. Like, these people, Fiona and Kyra, they grew up with Chucky, and so did the fans. The fans grew up with Chucky, and then you get people like James Janice from Dead Meat. He was interviewed in this, and that's another case where he was a fan just making YouTube content, and then you meet people again and again at conventions, and like as a fan, he ended up in like Scream 6, and he has connections with friendships with people now. So like fans, not that they're intentionally worming their way in, but like meeting these people again and again, you do end up making friends and this kind of extended family.
Oh no, particularly James from Dead Meat. I don't think I'm suggesting he shouldn't have been in it. He made some interesting contributions to it, but I don't know, just the touring of Comic-Con and it just felt like that could have been cut.
I guess the point, well, that was the point, I guess, wasn't it? That it was because in any film, you make really good friends with the cast or crew, and then that's it. You may never work together again. The niceness, the benefit of these conventions is that at least once a year, maybe multiple times a year, you get to hang out with these people again.
I can see the parallel, but I genuinely think that they should have gone through sort of just... They had the stuff about how Don and Fiona had become best friends. They had all these very real relationships. And then after the look on Comic-Con, they looked into people's perceptions of Chucky. Like, some saw him as a child, some saw him as an inanimate object, an employer, a dog. And that was great. I just really felt like you could have gone straight from that to that with no Comic-Con shit at all. It's not that it wasn't interesting, it's not that it wasn't okay to watch. I think to make it a tighter thing, I didn't need that. But it was still fun and still interesting, I guess.
I guess it's the opposite side to me. I'm not saying it should have been like a 6-hour documentary, but I think maybe that's the tightness of the recaps make the ending feel a bit looser.
Yeah, that's probably fair.
Because like we'll talk about them, the extras. I feel like the extras could have just been edited into the actual movie. Like, this movie could have been with the extras about 2 hours, and that would have been fine. It's a documentary.
Yeah, I think they could have been, but I also like them as like special featurettes as well.
One of them is like her talking about like family experiences and stuff, and it's like, isn't that the point of the doc? Why is that not in there? It's odd because at one point in the documentary, she talks about like, oh, she had to cut this for timing and stuff. And it's like, what timing? It's a documentary. I don't understand who at what point said it had to be 1 hour 45.
Yeah, and again, I think maybe you could have cut out the Comic-Con stuff and put in some of the stuff from the extras. But I don't know, maybe. I'd be interested to know what other people think about that, because it really did stick out like a sore thumb to me. And I wouldn't go as far as saying I was bored, but it just felt like it didn't need to be there and that we could have lost it. And then it ends with the wink, which I really, really liked. The wink at the end was really cool. Just having a quick look at my notes from the director's commentary. Anything else that I think is really fun? She did it on her own, which meant, that's a tough gig when you've got no one to bounce off. And I thought it was interesting, and I thought it was worth having on the DVD. And she's so clearly proud of what she's done. And you don't realise until almost, at least I didn't, until you listen to the commentary, that she's still really fucking young. She's like 23, 24. She's just so damn young. And this is an incredible achievement, as far as I'm concerned. I think it's great.
Oh, yeah. It's whether or not she wants to pursue this. I mean, she could do whatever she wants in her life after this. But, I'd be interested to see a documentary from her about something else, just to see what it would be like. Yeah. Because, I mean, as well, in terms of getting interviews and scheduling interviews and all that, she did a really good job given she talks in the commentary about how COVID affected all of us. There's multiple times and there's one time where she did more questions with Fiona, and that was separately at a different event. And that was just an example of how she kept saying, oh, I would have gone back and got more footage with this person, but I couldn't. She says the only reason Chucky season 1 and season 2 weren't covered in this, which would have made the documentary a fair bit longer. It probably would have been 2 hours if she included the entire TV show. The only reason she couldn't do that was because she wasn't involved with the production or sci-fi, so she could not go on set.
Yeah, because of COVID, which is a shame, but it is what it is. And she, at one point she was like, yeah, I probably should have got my dad to have had a shave or something when I interviewed during COVID, which is really fun. She added some nice stories about her dad as well, which I thought was really lovely and really personal and exactly what the commentary should have been. The only other couple of things was that we talked about how she had access to a lot of footage, but it turns out she had the same problem as James from Dead Meat with some legal problems on fair usage. So it wasn't as easy as perhaps we thought it was. She had to hire an attorney.
That was a really crazy story. Who was she talking to? She was at James and Chelsea's wedding, and she was talking to someone about how she was making the documentary and how she couldn't get the rights to some of these things. And wasn't it Heather Langenkamp she was talking to?
Maybe.
Or did someone point her to Heather Langenkamp? I think she was talking to Heather Langenkamp. She officiated the wedding. And Heather Langenkamp was like, oh, I just recently did a documentary about my experiences in Nightmare on Elm Street, and here's my attorney. This is how I got the rights. I mean, that's not nepotism. That's just she just happened to talk to the right person. That's
luck.
Yeah.
The only other thing was that the old footage was actually her with a camcorder and some fuckery. All the After Effects is her, so I'd quite like to go on her course. She learned a fuck ton.
Yeah, it is really well made.
Because she didn't want to use stock footage. She wanted to... everything that looked old was actually her.
And then she did like a really good job with the existing footage of like old interviews and old behind the scenes stuff, how it's cropped on like a TV and stuff. She dressed it up really well.
I mean, I loved that documentary, Dev, and I think obviously I was always going to because I'm a big Chucky fan, but I also think it's got real value as a study in family, found family, all those cliches, and what it's like to work in horror in general. I think it's got real value as a general kind of piece as well. I think it's I think it's a great documentary.
Yeah, as I said, I'm interested to see what she does after this. I think she did talk about, she said, like, documentaries are never over. You can always go back and add more. And so I think over there, America, I think whatever the COVID standards are now in terms of productions, but like, in a few years, I think she could return to this and do like a director's redux, make it, add in quite a lot more, like double the length, like getting new interviews and really fill it with everything she wanted to. Or, just make it like a sequel or something, like cover the TV show.
Yeah, I think you're right. Do you want to quickly look at the 3 featurettes as well?
Yeah, they're good.
Okay, first it was Candid Conversations, which I thought was just a really lovely little addition. It was charming and chatty, like just daft, sassy. Yeah, it was lovely. I think it added real value to the DVD release.
Yeah, really nice. I think some of this Candid, them laughing and joking and stuff. I think, it was her first documentary, so she wanted some formality to it. But I think this would have been nice in the documentary.
I really enjoyed the chat about the potential return of Glenn and Glenda. I thought that was really, really good.
Yeah, it is odd. It is funny hearing some of the details of what Kyra knows and what she doesn't know. I think this was in the full documentary or the commentary, but she did say, I think one of this was filmed so far back that she hadn't seen Cult of Chucky. And so she talked about like Fiona being like evil or something. And Fiona just laughs like, yeah, that happened.
And the only other thing from that particular thing that I wanted to highlight is I really want the recipe and someone with a laser printer so I can have a laser printed Glenn. Is it called a recipe for laser printing? I'm calling it a recipe.
I don't know, schematic plan. I don't know.
Might be a schematic recipe. The next one was favourite death scenes, which is, something that we've done on ChuckyVision. And frankly, I was appalled that no one's favourite death was Brittany. And I think it's interesting that the bubble bath was actually most people's favourite.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a really iconic death. And I think them describing why really kind of emphasised how cool it was with the telly causing the bubbles. And Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. But, it does get some honourable mentions, some of our favourites, like the random eye stab in Child's Play 2, the evil ruler beating, and the babysitter, and the second glass drop, which, again, we said in ours that was much better than the first.
Yeah, it's a good segment. This is a good example of a deleted scene where it's really fun to watch, but it is definitely a tangent in terms of the flow of the actual documentary.
Yeah, and I think of the two, Candid Conversations and Favourite Death Scene does feel much more like a proper extra featurette rather than cutscenes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's fun to hear, but it's definitely a bonus because it's just its own thing. It doesn't have much to do with the point of the documentary. And
then the final one was Reception from Families, and there were a lot of Addams Family references, which always pains me, because that's some of the shit I got at school. And I love how they talk about Chucky's pronouns and how he's a him and not an it.
Oh yeah, that was a really nice bit with Kirshner, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Kyra, I like those bits where, because a lot of the documentary is Kyra, you don't hear what Kyra says. It's just them responding to the question. And I like Kyra chiming in then. Like, you realize you keep calling it him, not an it. And Kirshner's like, oh my God, I have been this whole time.
Yeah, I think it's great. And I also like how these three do have more Kyra in, whereas the documentary was a little bit more formal.
That was a really nice one, I think, in the first one, when you learnt that because everyone was talking to Kyra off screen, when Kyra and Tony are on screen, they're talking to their mom off screen.
Yeah, that's good. Which is nice. And everybody from the Chucky franchise prefers Halloween to Christmas, and Brad Dourif scared the shit out of Fiona's friends when she was growing up by pretending to be Chucky. I think that's great.
Yeah, some of those stories are really good, yeah.
Yeah. Do you know what? All in all, I had a lovely afternoon going through this. I watched it once without making notes, and I wasn't bored the second time. I just thought this was just a fantastic present to us. A real kind of personal insight, not just from Kyra, but from everybody involved in Chucky. Something unique that is just for Chucky fans, because I don't think you'll really get another documentary like this. The ones you were talking about are deep dives and fun and interesting, but this landed differently for me.
Yeah, they are different. And I'll say as a positive they are different, because like another one I liked, In Search of Darkness, that was like a look at just 80s, like that boom of horror in the 80s. And those documentaries are really long, like 3-4 hours each. But in that sense, it almost becomes like an industry, like a grind. Like they did In Search of Darkness 2, 3, and then they did like 80s action movies and stuff. And that felt very much like, oh, this is making money. Let's keep doing it. And, like it's nice to hear hours of all of these old actors that we love from the 80s and stuff, like talking about their experiences and stuff. That's all nice. But like it does, behind the scenes, feel a bit like a cash cow. Whereas this doesn't at all. The camaraderie on screen feels so genuine.
Yeah, I think you're right. Dev, I've had a lovely time chatting about this. And I learned something new from watching this. And I just found it was a nice afternoon.
It is nice.
Before we go, where can people find you on the internet?
People can find me on Twitter at Absolute Travesty. That's about it. I guess if this is going out recently, I just did a written review of Friday the 13th Part 7 on framerated.co.uk. Go give that a read if you want. That was a fun little jaunt into looking back at that film.
And if you're looking for me, it is at MarkAdamsHC on Twitter and Instagram. I'm a bit better at Twitter, but I'm trying on Instagram. I've got another podcast, but you know about it already. It's about Red Dwarf. It's called Shipwrecked and Comatose, at Red Dwarf Pod on Twitter. So, that's it for this bonus episode. But we've got another one coming very, very soon as Amazon pull their finger out and send me my fucking Blu-ray. So until then, wanna play?
Very aggressive on that.
I know, right?
ChuckyVision is a podcast brought to you by the We Made This network. Follow us on Twitter at ChuckyVision. Follow the network on Twitter at WMT_network. Our website is WeMadeThisNetwork.com. The logo was designed by Dev, and the theme tune composed by Dark Fantasy Studios. Wanna play?
100 years since Nosferatu first terrified audiences on the big screen.
30 years since Francis Ford Coppola gave us Bram Stoker's Dracula.
And 10 years since Dark Shadows with Johnny Depp.
Vampire Videos is a podcast taking a look at this iconic blood-sucking monster on film and television.
I'm Dan Owen.
And I'm Hugh McStay.
And we're here to guide you through a century of vampirism on film. From Hollywood's golden age with Bela Lugosi as Count Dracula,
to the more lurid hammer horrors of the 60s and 70s starring Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee.
Through to the 80s boom in vampires, which brought these creatures of the night into the modern age.
And everything this century's had to offer us, from foreign and independent films, spoof comedies, and even teenage love stories. Yes, I'm talking about Twilight.
We aim to cover it all, one bite at a time.
So join us on a voyage into the depths of vampire cinema, old and new, with weekly guests offering their own insights and expertise. And why not follow us on Twitter at VampVideos?
A proud part of the We Made This podcast network. Subscribe now to Vampire Videos, and thanks for listening.